The other day, the UFC announced Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov for a UFC Fight Night main event later this year, and this immediately brought out a firestorm of MMA fans screaming from the top of their lungs, "Dagestani privilege," or "the UFC shows the Dagestani fighters favoritism." And while I could sit here on this very video and make a compelling case to support the argument that the Dagestanis are shown privilege by the UFC, it would be no different than people who present graphs with data where they manipulate the Y and X axis to misrepresent what is actually going on, because Dagestani privilege in that entire narrative is a complete fallacy. And we're going to break it all down in this video, because while there are multiple groups of people who are the reason that this narrative is so prevalent in MMA now, I believe there is one group that holds really the full responsibility, or the majority of the responsibility, for this narrative. And it's existed for about 6-7 years, and I've never actually called it out on video, so we're going to call it out in this very video today. But let's start with Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. Number 2 ranked Sandhagen versus number 9 ranked Nurmagomedov, who is now ranked number 10 because the rankings have updated since the fight announcement. People are screaming, number 2 versus number 10? How could this happen? How could the UFC do this? Well, first off, we're going to have to act like the rankings actually mean something. So we'll get to the rankings a little bit later in the video, but we're going to act like the rankings actually mean something, even though they don't. Number 10 versus number 2. There's no possible way that this has happened before, right? There's no possible way this has happened in recent memory without a Dagestani fighter involved, right? There's no way, right? Oh, what about number 1 Petr Yan versus number 11 Sean O'Malley? Keep in mind, Sean O'Malley only fought basically scrubs up until that point, okay? And by the way, the examples I'm giving you, I'm not even advocating against these fights. In most cases, I enjoyed each one of these matchups that I'm going to present to you as an example. So you have number 1 versus number 11 O'Malley. Where were the people complaining about that? Huh? Oh, wait, there's not a Dagestani fighter involved, other than, I guess, Petr Yan, not Dagestani, but Russian. And I know everyone kind of lumps in, basically, if you're any from the Caucasus region or from Russia, you're considered, in a way, a Dagestani fighter. But number 1 versus number 11, Sean O'Malley. Didn't matter when Sean O'Malley got the quote-unquote privilege. Then, even more recently, you have number 3, Dustin Poirier versus number 12, Benoit Saint-Denis. Where was the outrage there? Everyone loved that fight. You have number 12 versus number 3? How could that even matter? Oh, how could that even be possible? What about the rankings, the sanctity of the rankings? They must matter, right? Oh, no, it doesn't matter then. Oh, what about number 4, Gilbert Burns versus number 11, Jack Della Maddalena? And by the way, the rankings that I'm giving you are the rankings that they were ranked when the fight actually happened, not the current rankings right now. So don't go look at the current rankings and say, Joey, you're wrong. I'm talking about when the fight actually happened. There was no outrage there. Everyone loved that fight, myself included. Oh, what, you want more examples? Oh, no Dagestani fighter involved there. Oh, what about number 4, Sean Strickland versus unranked Alex Pereira? What about that? It wasn't a big deal when Pereira fought Bruno Silva to get a shot at number 4, Sean Strickland. There was no outrage there. Oh, wait, no Dagestani fighter involved. Oh, you want to go to a more recent example? Oh, what about the champion Alessandro Pantoja defending his title against number 10 ranked Steve Erceg? What about that example? No outrage there. Everyone applauded that matchup for the most part. Oh, wait, that's a title shot. That's an actual title shot there. And I understand, and I know what people are going to comment down below and say, Joey, sometimes there's extenuating circumstances and you have to take into account the context. Yeah, you do. You do have to take into account the context. But at the end of the day, the context of a lot of these fights where a certain Dagestani fighter may get a jump up the rankings is no different, you know. Obviously, each situation is going to be its own unique situation. But to act like this is the only time it happens, the only time a fighter gets a massive jump up the rankings is when it's a Dagestani fighter, is completely ridiculous. Let's get another couple examples. You have the champion Michael Bisping. This is from a while ago. The champion in Michael Bisping defended his title in the UK against number 13 ranked Dan Henderson. Oh, where was the outrage there? Everyone loved that fight. Undeserved title shot. Let's skip over Yoel Romero. No big deal. Oh, we want to see the rematch. Let's give number 13 Dan Henderson a title shot. Dead body almost at that point. And he almost won the fight, which is even crazier. But yeah, no outrage there. And then the last example I'm going to give you is another example that people use to support the argument of Dagestani favoritism. And that is number 7, Sean Strickland versus unranked Abu Dhabi. This happened last summer, I believe it was. And while I didn't necessarily agree with that fight, apparently at the time, nobody was willing to accept a fight with Sean Strickland. So Sean Strickland wanted to fight. He wanted to stay active. So they gave him Abu Dhabi. And oh, what happened after that? And we're going to talk about this undeserved title shots in a little bit. What happened after that? Oh, Sean Strickland got a title shot off of beating unranked Abu Dhabi. Nobody complained about that either. It was no big deal. Sean Strickland getting an undeserved title shot off of beating an unranked Dagestani fighter. Was no big deal then. No big deal then. But I could sit here and go for another hour about fighters who were ranked far back in the rankings or unranked getting a jump up in competition. But I'm not going to do that. We've gone through enough examples. We're going to talk about the rankings here in a second. But I just want to say, a lot of these times you have jump up the rankings. You have a jump up the rankings because there's a decent amount of hype behind a fighter. The UFC thinks they're ready to make that leap. And a lot of the fans want to see them test it. So in most cases, in almost all cases, okay, I want to say in almost all cases, I'm okay with the guy jumping up the rankings to get a title shot because I don't believe in the, not to get a title shot, I'm sorry, I misspoke there, to get a top ranked guy because I don't believe in the rankings anyway. I think the rankings are completely flawed. I don't believe in the rankings at all. The rankings are absolute horseshit, to summarize what I'm trying to say about the rankings. So you're only basing who deserves what, at least in these fans who are complaining about Umar fighting Cory, you're solely basing it on the number next to their name. Is that what I'm understanding? But yet you don't complain about these other fights that happen all the time. Again, they happen every year to non-Dagestani fighters, at least a couple times a year, where you have cases like this, but you're basing it on the number next to their name and not even the specific circumstances. Because first off, there's not really an open matchup for Cory Sandhagen right now. First off, Cory Sandhagen wants Umar Nurmagomedov because he believes that it will get him a title shot because he believes in ending a hype train. By the way, congrats to Cory Sandhagen for actually being smart and understanding the game. But you look at the rankings right now, okay? Right now, there's not really a matchup that makes a whole lot of sense for Cory Sandhagen, especially considering people are saying he needs to wait for a title shot. O'Malley Merab isn't even booked yet. Cory Sandhagen's already been out for a decent period of time. You're going to have Cory wait for another 6 months or so to potentially get a title shot against the winner, and the division moves so fast. But you look above Umar in the rankings, Rob Font already fought him. Jose Aldo just fought and may not even re-sign with the UFC. Song Yudong already fought him. Okay, Devison Figueiredo, could you make the case for Devison Figueiredo, who just beat unranked Cody Garbrandt? So I know he has a better resume in general. Then you got Henry Cejudo. Okay, could that happen? Henry's coming off a loss. Marlon Rivera's coming off a loss. They've already fought. Piotr Jan, they've already fought. So essentially, the only real true option right now would be Umar Nurmagomedov for Cory Sandhagen. That's the only true option. But I don't want to harp too much on that fight because I want to get to the actual rankings themselves. And I've talked about this before, and I'll put it up on the screen. How are the rankings determined? And basically, it's voted on by a panel of media members. And I just want to skip down to the dark gray portion at the bottom. The rankings panel is comprised of media members from the following outlets: MMA Oddsbreaker, CFMU 93.3. I can't read that one. Fight News, Fight Network, Cherokee Scout, Burbank Leader. You got Blood and Sweat at the bottom, Inside Fighting Radio. First off, who are these people? I don't know who they are. So you want matchmaking based on who these random people deem what number represents each fighter. Keep in mind, Max Holloway is ranked behind Justin Gaethje right now as we speak. Multiple spots behind Justin Gaethje as we speak. Yeah, those rankings really matter. Those rankings make a lot of sense. And I could go through and pick apart the rankings right now and tell you, oh, why is this guy ranked above this guy? Why is this guy ranked above that guy? I'm not going to do that. It would make the video way too long, and I'm not going to spend too much time. The rankings are irrelevant. The rankings do not matter. And maybe I'm more prone to that argument because I've been watching the sport since the rankings didn't even exist. And we just looked at certain fighters. Oh, this guy looks really good and he's destroying everyone. Let's put him against this guy who's already proven to be super high level, and let's see how this guy does. That's how it used to be because there used to be no numbers. The rankings they only exist for casual fans or fans who aren't paying super close attention to the UFC to understand how quote unquote good a fighter is. That's the only reason the UFC even has rankings, to basically promote them to casual fans. That's it. That's it. Now, a few other narratives. Let's get to a few other narratives that I've heard regurgitated time and time again over the past few years. Islam Makhachev got an undeserved lightweight title shot. This is one of the dumbest narratives I have ever heard in my entire life. This was dumb back then. They're like, Islam only beat Bobby Green and Dan Hooker to get a title shot. Undeserved title shot. Islam Makhachev was on a 10-fight winning streak. Nobody else in the division at the time had a better resume to get a title fight. They didn't have a good winning streak. They didn't deserve. There's no one that deserved a title shot at the time. Islam had a 10-fight win streak. He was dominating everyone, took Dan Hooker down, ripped his arm off. That win has aged quite well. Beat the crap out of Bobby Green. I know Bobby Green, lost to Jalen Turner and whatnot, but Bobby Green then went out there and chinned Grant Dawson later on. And I know we're kind of jumping ahead of time, but you get my point. Islam was going out there and dominating decent fighters. He was also scheduled to fight multiple top-level fighters, and for one reason or another, those fights didn't happen. And Islam deserved that title shot. Anyone saying that Islam Makhachev got an undeserved title shot deserves to be slapped upside the head. But on top of that, let's say Islam was getting an undeserved title shot, okay? Let's take that narrative and let's say, oh, you know what? Maybe it was undeserved. Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, that's all that. Well, what about all these countless undeserved title shots? What about Colby Covington getting an undeserved title shot? Dude didn't have a single ranked win on his resume, current ranked, when he got a title shot against Leon Edwards. Okay? What about Kayla Harrison, who's probably getting a title shot next, who has a win over Holly Holm? That's just one win. What about the talk of Yuri Prochazka? And again, this is just talk of Yuri Prochazka getting a title shot after losing to Pereira and then getting one win since, and potentially skipping over a Dagestani fighter, which we'll talk about more in a second. So what about all these cases where you have undeserved title shots? Sean Strickland, we talked about it earlier, getting an undeserved title shot after beating Abu Smagomedov. He beat an unranked fighter to jump into a title shot. Oh, you didn't complain then. You didn't complain when Strickland was getting Dana White privilege. You didn't complain when Colby Covington got Dana White privilege. You only care when it's a Dagestani fighter. And unless I'm forgetting one right now, there's never been a Dagestani fighter who's gotten an undeserved title shot. Because while I say the rankings don't matter, I believe earning a title shot matters. That's what I believe actually matters, is earning a title shot. Because if you start devaluing the title by giving countless undeserved title shots, Marlon Vera is another example. People did kind of complain about that one, but not as much. It was, oh, this is a great storyline, and this is going to make the UFC money. If Conor McGregor gets a win over Michael Chandler and they throw him into a title shot, people are going to eat that shit up. They're not going to say, what's up with this Irish privilege for Conor McGregor? They're not going to say that. They're going to want to see him in a title shot. So we get countless undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot after undeserved title shot. Nobody cares. Nobody cares that Colby gets a title shot because he sucks off Donald Trump. Essentially, that's what's going on there. Nobody cares then, but, oh, I'll be damned if a guy with a number 9 next to his name, who blood and sweat put next to his name, fights a number 2 in Cory Sandhagen, who, by the way, blood and sweat also put that number 2 next to their name. That's what we hear. We get countless undeserved title shots. It's ridiculous. Let's give a couple other examples of quote-unquote Dagestani privilege. I've seen people mention this. Ikram Aliskerov getting booked against Paulo Costa, who was ranked, I don't know exactly where he was ranked at the time, but it was somewhere in the top 10. I believe it was number 6, number 7. It might have even been number 5. Like, how could Ikram get a Paulo Costa fight, a contender fight? How could that happen? Oh, wait, Paulo Costa didn't have a single ranked win either. He didn't have a single ranked win, current ranked win in the middleweight division. Oh, okay, so it matters if we book him against Ikram? No, that fight made perfect sense. Oh, Ikram looks really good. Let's test him against Paulo Costa, who we kind of know, where he's at skill-wise, even though he hasn't been fighting the best competition himself. He just beat up the dead body of Luke Rockhold. Okay, what about Paulo Costa getting a shot at Sean Strickland? There's another example that I didn't even think of. Oh, that really doesn't make sense. There's no outrage for that, really. People are like, oh, yeah, I like this fight. I like this matchup. It's just, it only matters when it's a Dagestani fighter, okay? Ikram versus Paulo Costa made perfect sense. And again, the rankings don't matter. So the number next to their name does not matter. We want to see compelling fights. The one narrative that I haven't seen, going back to Cory Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov, the one narrative that I haven't seen is, oh, this fight isn't even competitive. Cory's going to absolutely wash him. It's going to be a domination. If that was your argument, I co-sign it 100%. If you look at a fight and you say, look, this fight isn't even going to be competitive, I don't want to see it. Why are they making this fight when guys rank 13 and guys rank, 1 or 2 or whatever numbers you want to put next to the name, a la blood and sweat? Okay, I can co-sign that argument. You haven't seen that. You haven't seen that. So it only matters to you the number next to his name and the country or region that he's from. Because let's be real here. We're saying Dagestani, but really we're kind of summing up the Caucasus and Russia all together. That's really what we're doing. That's what they do. We're just summing that up. So Ikram versus Paulo Costa, how could that ever be booked? Ridiculous argument. It happens all the time. You get, dumb fights. And again, that's not even a dumb fight. You get dumb fights booked all the time that nobody complains about because, oh, wait, it only matters when it's a fighter you don't like or they're from a region of the world that you don't like or don't favor. And we're going to get to the one group that's causing that narrative time and time again. But let's move on to another narrative. Oh, they're getting main events. Abu Magomedov's getting a main event. Recently, Shamil Gaziev gets a main event against Jairzinho Rozenstruik. How could that even be possible? Well, again, you have to take into consideration context. In that case of Shamil Gaziev versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik, was that a main event caliber fight? I certainly don't think it was. The UFC just threw it together because they owe ESPN a certain number of events. And that fight night card was originally scheduled for Saudi Arabia. I almost said Abu Dhabi. It was originally scheduled for Saudi Arabia. So therefore, they're like, okay, let's put Shamil Gaziev in there because he's an undefeated Dagestani fighter. Let's put him in there and at least we'll be able to offer Saudi Arabia a decent event. Well, Saudi Arabia said, you know what? This card's dog shit. Let's reschedule it. And look at the card they're getting now. So that makes no sense. And also I'm not going to dig through every main event and say, oh, well, this guy didn't deserve a main event spot at this point in time. This guy didn't deserve a main event spot at this time. But just a very simple example. Is anybody complaining about Rodrigo Nascimento getting a main event spot? They're complaining about the quality of the main event, but they're not complaining Nascimento's getting privilege. He's main eventing a fight night card against Derek Lewis this weekend. What kind of privilege is this? I don't know what region of the world Nascimento's from, but nobody's complaining about that. And you could go back literally the last 2 years, last 5 years even, you could find countless examples of people getting main events who quote unquote don't deserve the main events. Now let's actually talk about what goes on with some of these fighters from the Caucasus. Again, I understand not every one of these fighters is Dagestani, but the people who portray this narrative, this fallacy of Dagestani privilege, these people who portray this just summarize the Caucasus, which could be the Georgian fighters, it could be the Chechen fighters, the Dagestani fighters, so on and so forth. Let's look at Arman Tsarukyan, okay? Arman Tsarukyan has undoubtedly earned a title shot. And in his last fight against Charles Oliveira at UFC 300, everyone said, not everyone, okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but again, I just want to give you some cases here. They're like, oh yeah, it was a robbery. It was a robbery win for Arman. If you think Charles Oliveira won that fight, and again, this is somewhat Charles Oliveira fanboys and not necessarily the anti-Dagestani people, but I just want to show you some examples of, okay, well, this guy's now earned his way, and people are saying, you know what, it was a robbery win against Charles Oliveira. You look at the 2 fights before that against Joaquim Silva. Oh, he got rocked. He got exposed badly. So he doesn't deserve, or he's, just not a good fighter and he needs to win, string together a 10-fight win streak to get a title shot. Just delusional. What about Merab Dvalishvili, a Georgian fighter? He's on a 10-fight win streak, already got skipped over for a title shot once. When he said he wanted to fight Sean O'Malley, people say, oh, he refused to fight a teammate. He never got offered the fight against Aljamain Sterling. There was never even a moment in time where the title shot was available to him since he became number 1 contender. I know someone's going to comment that down, that narrative. But Merab's on a 10-fight win streak, and we're still not even sure he's going to get the next shot at Sean O'Malley. He's been dominating top contenders. Gets no respect. People crap on him. They're like, oh, he's a grappler. Oh, he's boring, which is crazy to even say Merab is boring. It's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. It's delusional. But, oh, there's another guy from the Caucasus region. Oh, he's strung together all these wins. He's beat top-ranked guys, but now he's not good enough to get a title shot. He hasn't earned his way to a legit title shot. We're not even talking about earning a contender spot because Blood and Sweat already put a number 1 next to his name, okay? Another example, Magomed Ankalaev. 12-fight unbeaten streak, 10 wins. There was a no contest in there. as well as, what else was it for Magomed? It was a no contest and a draw against Jan Blachowicz, which is crazy. This guy beat Jan Blachowicz. Arguably, most people agree that he beat Jan Blachowicz. I know it was a draw for the vacant title. It's now been over a year. He still doesn't have a title shot. He may not even get the next title shot against Magomed, or not against Magomed, against Alex Pereira. And he simply tweeted out to Pereira, "Me versus you in Abu Dhabi, ? And people have made a narrative. Magomed Ankalaev is demanding a fight in Abu Dhabi. He's demanding a fight in Abu Dhabi. No, that's not what he did at all. He did not demand a fight in Abu Dhabi. My guess is he thought that was a reasonable time frame, and okay, he wanted to fight in Abu Dhabi. That doesn't mean he's demanding. That doesn't mean he gets to make any demands. At the end of the day, if it's offered to him in Las Vegas where he fought Johnny Walker, maybe he would just fight there instead. He just suggested that, okay? And the last one I'm going to give you is Movsar Evloev. 18-fight win streak is called boring by Dana White, okay? Dana White shit on his fight against Arnold Allen, which, by the way, was the second best fight on the entire main card. It was a great fight. And fans crap on him and say he's boring, he doesn't find finishes. I can't even remember a boring Movsar Evloev fight. I can't remember a single boring one. But people crap on Movsar Evloev, because he's from the Caucasus region. You know, Movsar even suggested that he wanted a title fight. People were scoffing at the idea. Where's his favoritism? 18-0, undefeated. He's not getting a title shot next. It's going to be Max Holloway or Alexander Volkanovski or even potentially Brian Ortega over Movsar Evloev. So where's every single one of those fighters from the Caucasus? Where's this Dagestani privilege? Where's this Caucasus privilege that the UFC apparently offers to every fighter ever? It just doesn't exist. And no matter what these fighters do, especially the Dagestani fighters, Caucasus region fighters, they can't win. Because before Umar gets the Cory Sandhagen fight, people are like, Umar Nurmagomedov's a can crusher. Umar Nurmagomedov fights nothing but bums. You've seen that before with Islam Makhachev, Habib, countless examples. I'm not going to go into all of them, but they're can crushers. But then when they fight legit opposition, they don't deserve this. Well, if you don't like them, why wouldn't you want to see, and you don't think they're good and they're only crushing cans, why wouldn't you want to see them, quote unquote, exposed against a top tier fighter? So no matter what they do, they can't win. They literally can't win. They're either a can crusher or they're getting undeserved contender fights. Basically, they have to beat the entire rankings from 15-1 to earn any respect, essentially. Another narrative that you see time and time again is basically if you're from the Caucasus region, if you're from Dagestan, if you're from Russia, you're automatically on PEDs. It doesn't matter. That's a narrative that goes around. And then also I'm going to talk about they're crucified nonstop. If they pull out of a fight, they're crucified unbelievably. Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira 2. Oliveira got a little bit of heat for pulling out of that fight. Could you imagine if Islam would have pulled out of that fight with an injury? Could you imagine a world where he pulled out of that fight with an injury? He would have never heard the end of it. He would have never heard the end of it. Anytime a Dagestani fighter, Caucasus region fighter pulls out, they get criticized for it. And then the last narrative I want to really cover is the Abu Dhabi narrative. Apparently, these Dagestani Caucasus region fighter haters think anywhere with sand is a home field advantage, okay? They still have to travel to Abu Dhabi. It's just less of traveling than it would be for them to go to the United States. They act like every Dagestani Muslim fighter who fights in Abu Dhabi lives under the cage in Abu Dhabi or lives in Abu Dhabi. That's just simply not true, and I'm tired of hearing it. Yeah, of course they want Abu Dhabi. The judges are going to rig it for them there. Totally ignoring the fact that the UFC brings the judges from America. Those judges that are judging the fights in Abu Dhabi, they're bringing the judges from America, okay? A lot of these fighters who want to fight in Abu Dhabi, okay, is it closer for them? Yes. But do they live there? No. They still have to travel a decent amount of time there, okay? So stop acting like Abu Dhabi is them rolling out of their bed and fighting there. And the UFC has a contract with Abu Dhabi to bring big events there. How is this any different than when Leon Edwards fights in the UK or Michael Bisping fights in the UK or countless other fighters fight in America? And just go through a couple examples. Magomed Ankalaev, let's go through the location of his last few fights. Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Las Vegas, Dallas, Texas, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi. Norfolk, Virginia. I'm not going to go any further. You get the point. Let's look at Movsar Evloev. And I haven't even checked this. I'm just going off right here. This wasn't even planned. I'm just going off. Okay, let's look at Movsar Evloev. Oh, Canada, New Jersey, Las Vegas, Glendale, Arizona, Abu Dhabi, Singapore, Russia. There you go. So you act like every single fight is in Abu Dhabi or somewhere in the Middle East. Is just simply not true. Let's look at Arman Tsarukyan. Las Vegas, Texas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Canada. Okay, let's go through Islam Makhachev, who's a champion. Of course, they're going to take him to Abu Dhabi, where the market is there for Islam Makhachev. Abu Dhabi, Perth, Australia, Abu Dhabi, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Abu Dhabi, Russia, Canada, Boston, Massachusetts, Brooklyn. You get it. You get it, okay? So stop acting like every Dagestani fighter is automatically just, oh, they're just getting every fight in Abu Dhabi and the judges are rigging it for them when the judges are brought over from America. Now let's talk about what real privilege is, okay? Let's talk about what real, actual UFC privilege is. Sean O'Malley got real UFC privilege, okay? He fought nothing but scrubs for the longest time. We're talking for literal years. Got favorable matchup after favorable matchup after favorable matchup. I don't think there's anything wrong with the UFC trying to build up Sean O'Malley because they looked at him as a future star. I'm not saying this is wrong. I'm just saying for years, he was in the UFC for what, 4 years? Fighting straight up scrubs, okay? Again, I'm not saying anything's wrong with it, but that is privilege that he's not getting thrown in the deep end. I think it's better to be able to build your career for years, especially when you're young, fighting no names, fighting lower skilled fighters, to build up your skill set before you get thrown into the deep end. Eventually, O'Malley got thrown into the deep end, which we talked about earlier. But my point is, that's real privilege. Bo Nickel is getting real privilege right now, basically getting hand-picked grocery store cashiers and Cody Bumdage to build his career. And he's going to continue to get that for another year or two. Imagine if they did that for, again, I went back, Can Crusher versus undeserved contender, fighting undeserved contenders. It's always one or the other. No matter what, there's no happy medium for the people who make this claim. You got Bo Nickel literally fighting grocery store cashier after grocery store cashier after grocery store cashier. And even O'Malley, again, to give another example of O'Malley, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Oh, O'Malley gets to fight Marlon Chito Vera for his first title defense. That isn't privilege. And that's more egregious than anything. I hate undeserved title shots. Absolutely hate undeserved title shots. So we have to stop acting like you can't pick out other examples. And again, I'm not even saying there was anything wrong with that. I'm just pointing out that people don't necessarily complain about this, but they complain if it's a Dagestani fighter because blood and sweat gave them a certain number next to their name in the rankings that don't matter. Now, honestly, and actually there's one more example. Shavkat Rakhmonov, okay? Now, this isn't a great example because he doesn't get as much hate, but he grappled Wonderboy Thompson and he was called boring. He's 18-0 or 19-0. I think he's 18-0 with nothing but finishes. And because he's from over in that region, all of a sudden he was boring after the Wonderboy Thompson win. So there's another example. But there are multiple reasons why these narratives are regurgitated through the MMA community. And I've touched on a lot of them. I've touched on a lot of them that people aren't willing to really discuss. I've talked about fans hating fighters based on their religion. I talked about fans hating fighters because they're Muslim. I talked about people, and I've talked about it countless times in this video, disliking fighters based on the region of the world that they're from. I've talked about, fans hating on fighters because they don't like their quote unquote grappling heavy style, even though sometimes it's not necessarily true. I've talked about all that. But one thing I failed to mention is a certain group of people that continually regurgitate this narrative. And I've always knew it in the back of my mind, but I don't think I've ever said it out loud. I don't think I've said it in a video. I don't think I've said it on a live stream. And it is the Conor McGregor casuals. I think a lot of this anti-Dagestani sentiment is because Khabib Nurmagomedov destroyed Conor McGregor back in 2018. He took him down, he beat him up, he destroyed him, he mauled him, and then he submitted him with a neck crank afterwards. And I think a lot of those fans who got in the sport because of Conor McGregor's, star power, I think a lot of people have never let that go. They're like, oh, you ruined Conor McGregor. You ruined our Conor McGregor. How could you? And that hate transcended into wanting Conor to get that rematch eventually that he never got. And then when Khabib retired, people acted like Khabib Nurmagomedov was scared of contenders. And I just think over time, since 2018, you have a lot of these fans who were casuals, who were brought into the sport by Conor McGregor, who just hate the Dagestani fighters now. And they just want to find any and all ways to hate on them and delegitimize them time and time again, all because he smashed Conor McGregor back in 2018. And here we are in 2024, and people are hating on Islam Makhachev. People are hating on Movsar Evloev. People are hating on Magomed Ankalaev, all because of that fateful night back in 2018 when Conor McGregor was trying to gas out Khabib Nurmagomedov by getting smashed on the ground, according to Dominic Cruz. That is one of the major reasons that this entire narrative is regurgitated through the MMA community, and people will try to make these arguments because without all the context I gave you in this video, people would make these claims and not give you other examples, and you'd be like, you know what, this guy's right, and it's just simply not true. And I could make that video and it'd probably be more popular, honestly, to just claim UFC showing favoritism to the Dagestani fighters. I could make that video and probably get more likes, subscribers, more views, everything. But I'm not going to do that. That's not what we do here, to quote Dana White. We call out the bullshit on this channel. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching.